of working in an exhibition or had an event, I sent them another email and a picture saying, look, this is what I've just done. It must have worked, because in the end they ended up with a Chinese visa for 2 trips. One for the first trip that I went with my partner, and the second one where I actually went alone. So there's a couple of seats here and here. Are you okay? So, right. So in China, it was a completely different experience. The month that I went travelling through China prepared me. I did lithographs. I created lithographs, woodcut prints and photo etchings. And when I was in China, I had a link with a guy from the BBC. So I was able to, he rang me in China and I spoke on the radio to Radio Humberside. And then also another colleague that I work with on a Ferens committee, she put a website together. So it was great. I just kept sending things. Firstly, I've got a few pictures to give you sort of the general atmosphere of China. This is Beijing Airport, obviously built for the Olympics. Also sort of been famous because someone tried to blow themselves up in a wheelchair in it last year. It's massive, high tech. I mean, China is like a building site. This, however, is one of their amazing palaces in the Forbidden City, which is just this huge site where you go palace after palace. What they do is they don't let anyone in the palaces, they just have to crowd round at the doorways and take pictures. So all the time there's this massive queue. Nearly all the tourists are Chinese themselves. And I suppose this says a lot about China. They all want to see where they've come from, these tourists. They've got the technology, the iPhones and everything, but it's very crowded and it's hard for everybody. This is one of the night markets in Beijing, big tourist draw. You can get anything to eat at this market, as you can see, from starfish to cicadas, water beetles, snakes, and going down on the underground. They check you on the underground. When you go in, it's like airport security. You have to put your bags through and everything. Look at this, it's all digital displays. There is nothing sort of 19th century about this, it's 21st century. Shopping, just there are miles and miles of these sort of little alleys with little shops in for people to go and visit. And these are not particularly for foreign tourists as we know them. They're for people coming into Beijing from other places as well as people in Beijing. One for the graphic students, Coca-Cola gets everywhere. And couldn't resist it. Night market, so completely different, but obviously everyone's still got the mobile phone. And this airport had opened 2 days before we arrived, so all the time you've got this massive upscaling of technology and everything. Went on a train, this is a toilet. Some things never change really, do they? But they did sort of try to keep it clean. I think that was first class as well. Building site. China is a building site. This building site was at a memorial. It was actually a big selection of Buddhas in temples. But you can see there's a big thing about there's no safety in there. The workers camp in tents on the site while they're working. These people are travelling probably hundreds of miles in a group of people to do it. But the young people there, as they're going around in tourists, and there weren't very many European tourists, as I said, are into the branding. They want to be where the Europeans are. This is, someone's put that in, they haven't even realised it's a foreign, like it's sort of backwards or whatever. Oh, probably Russian, isn't it? But it's always about that going towards the west. This was one of the places we stayed where you can see, we were looking over from the balcony. If you were on the ground, you would not see anything but the outside of that, the front of the houses, but inside it's just whatever people can make, and you can see the Hewlett-Packard here, this guy up on the roof, the mending the roof. This goes down to minus 30 degrees where they live in winter, or 13 actually, not 30, but it gets cold. It's quite high up, and that's how a lot of the people live. And then you've got very, wealthy people as well. Big contrast. This beautiful area, which is on their 20 yuan note, which we went down. But that's enough about China. So I spent the summer in China. I went from Beijing to Hong Kong, which is a long way, mostly by train. And then I came back to England, did a week at college working, went back to Guanalan to print, just north of Shenzhen. It was amazing. I had my own studio, fantastic workshop, and I could be there 24 hours a day. And the technicians printed for me, but I did print my own woodblock. There was a lotus field. It was beautiful, this village. It's a little bit like The Prisoner, that TV programme from the 70s, where you have these buildings around, and this was a print workshop there. It was a big tourist attraction. You constantly got people with umbrellas to protect from the sun. This is the other thing, little golf trolleys that they took people round. They had a lot of Chinese dignitaries that would come round, and they would sort of ferry them round on that. This was the area that the artist lived in. My house was probably sort of just somewhere behind there, and these were 300-year-old houses, and they were renovated. It did rain. It was like a tropical storm sometimes. It was mostly 35 degrees. On the right there you can see that's where the print base was. This side they had galleries and a temple. This is what I went for, the print base, and it was fantastic. This is the screen printing area. Up this end, Chinese often had those very traditional woodcuts that showed the working chairman Mao ethic, and they actually took in, a lot of people would send them work and say, I want this printed. This was something that they were commissioned to print. There's probably about 5 proofs there, and the printing with 5 or 6 silk screens in 5 or 6 different tones of grey to get this even sort of delicate print. Oh, and just over here for anyone that's into print, this is a roll of Reeves paper. I'm a bit of a paper geek really, but I just love printing paper. This is someone else's work where they just sent something and said, we want 30 of those, and the technicians actually do the separations. They take everything out and draw it by hand and then print their edition. These were the technicians in the etching area, so you can see the etching press there. You can see they've got the prints hanging up and the drying paper off, the mixing ink, and someone would send them the plates and this, saying this is which colours we want. So the technicians have to mix them to be exact, and there's no breadth of you can be a little bit lighter or darker. It's exact. This was one of the plates that they were doing for someone else, and the guy had obviously just sent a drawing, and then they painted stop out on to get the exact print. I mean, I suppose this is how in China, it's a massive, massive country, big industry, people selling fine art, so they can do it. This is sort of dream screen printing mixing area. mixed everything in these sort of bowls down here, and very accurate. They'd print maybe 30 colours sometimes to get what they wanted. One of the print presses got the little wooden pallet there, so you can get onto it, and they were very keen on this yellow tape, so they do photo exposed silk screens and then tape up so that they protect the rest of the paper, so you got a really clean print. You can see here, this is the silkscreen printing team, and they must have found a little hole somewhere at the back. So the guy at the back with the white collar is the chief of the print team. He leads it. It's very hierarchical. You always have, everyone knows where their place is. So there's him there, this is his second in command, this girl's the intern, and these two are sort of somewhere in between. And there's another girl over there just working on something else that's going to be printed later. Beautiful sunsets. I'd sort of walk home sometimes at this time of night. Everything was very lush. This is my house. I had the whole house, but really that was my bedroom, and really you didn't cook or anything in it. You had the living room. Got my name on the little chalk plaque there. And security's not a problem there because security guards were everywhere. And they had across the door you could actually push these poles, which meant that when it got really hot it wasn't too hot, the air could circulate. Can you see down here there's a concrete sort of dip, it's a trough, and I guess at some point people would have maybe washed their feet in there, but it was home to the wildlife in my house. There was a certain amount of wildlife in where I was staying, and this would fit on the palm of your hand, and it ate the mosquitoes. So I never really got mosquito bites because it was just eating them. So we had quite a few. This was a view from my studio, just out into the distance across these sort of fields. Breakfast, hard-boiled eggs and these dumplings, and inside the dumplings I think it was some sort of beet. They were lovely. This is a better view of the print studio, and this sort of plasticky area, like a U-shape, that had tours coming in all the time, so people would come into that area and look out to see what was going on. This me at the door, the print room, this is my studio. So they had a series of about 8 or 9 studios for visiting artists. Some were from China, some were from America, Australia, Germany, anywhere really that the people were coming from. And you got the view to the outside, and on one side you had a metallic wall. It did rain. This was the view from the toilets, and the toilets were like French toilets, but in general it was clean, but you couldn't escape the wildlife. And so the cockroaches were, there's just something about them really, isn't it, that's not very nice. But anyway, you got used to sort of avoiding them. They didn't like the light. Security guy at the door, front door of the print base, and there was usually someone out here. You could always see 3 security men at any one point, so they're quite hot in it. And this is a security man's bike with his little lights and everything. So I think China on the whole, in Beijing you can't use the internet. It just didn't work when I was there. But here it was okay, but there were certain things that you couldn't do, and if they had dignitaries, they'd often have just shed loads of police in there just to make sure everything was safe. So I had my prints, lithographs, woodcuts. It was really influenced by being somewhere like when you saw the studio, it was meticulously clean, so that attention to detail, you have to make something good. And I'd done some life drawing the previous year in San Francisco, so that was handy. I could use that as inspiration, and drew them in China. I worked and reworked on them. You didn't have anything else to do apart from work. The first thing I did was a drawing of one of my daughters. I must have been a bit homesick at some point, I suppose, but I didn't feel as I missed them, but probably because when I was drawing them it just felt like they were there. And so I drew in pencil and Chinograph, and then thought that's a bit too tight, really. I should be experimenting. It's a bit of that thing where sometimes when you do something, the first thing you do is just to get your eye in, and then after that you sort of relax a little bit. And putting one over the top was quite interesting, but really I didn't go much beyond that. I started playing about with some photographs I got of plants from San Francisco as well, but then while I was there, one of my cousins died, and it sort of changed things a bit because I started thinking about that. This was a view from my studio, so you could sort of look out and see people working. This was in my studio. I didn't use drink from glasses or anything. I had these bowls all the time, and I was just took my laptop and I was just playing about with that. And then I started drawing my other daughter, so I was once again experimenting with the ink, and I was fascinated by what happened. It's touche, so it's like a oily Indian ink that you use, and you get these amazing textures. So I really liked what was happening there. That's not my fine art head bit there, but and especially you could manipulate it, and over again I was using this with Chinograph and baby wipes, so I would sort of wipe a bit off and then put a bit more on until I sort of got this. In fact, looking at this now, I quite like the watery effect, but I went on from that and ended up drawing this sort of meticulous pattern into work with that. I suppose it was just it just felt right, and I drew it very carefully, and then decided, I thought, oh, it's Chinograph, I'll just wipe it out, and I actually washed it all away, so I had to draw it all again. But in the end, you know, I quite like that feel of something so precise next to the really abstract feel there. Then I'd also got some photographs that I'd taken with me from China and from some I'd taken in Beverley, and I started working with, these were shapes of figures. Once again, I think this was a group of waitresses originally, but I really liked what happened with these, the movement of the ink. And this was a couple of folk dancers from Beverley, loosely speaking, but they had black faces. I just liked working with the ink, and you worked on something that was like a, I don't know if you can see at the top, it's like a plastic tracing paper. We used to call it Coda Trace, I don't know what it's called now, but it's very good to actually put an image on, and then you can expose it for a lithograph. You can make a photographic lithograph from. What happened then, as I said, was my cousin died, and unfortunately she died over in the UK, and obviously I couldn't come back for a funeral. So that changed what I was doing, and she was just in my head, so I wanted to draw something that was a way of my saying goodbye to her. So it ended up that I just drew what I drew, and this was what happened. It was that thing about someone sort of looking out and in the sort of looking to where someone is, because there is that thing about people sometimes say, you look, you know, that they haven't gone, they're just somewhere else. So I wanted to put that into a picture, and because we were cousins and she had girls and I had girls, it was about the female form, and I worked with that. So I was sort of quite ready to try that. I wanted to also not to put too much form in it, to try and keep it quite, to make the marks work. When it printed, of course it flipped, and it just felt wrong for me because I've been looking at it facing out to the right. So I was sort of disappointed. What happened was, you know, I had this image, and, oh, excuse me, and then they put it on the plate. This is a lithographic plate, it's aluminium, and they do it by taking that film that you saw before, this film, and they lay it down on top of the metal, put it into a vacuum and shine a bright light on, so it exposes, just like a photo silk screen. Well, it's not like that, but it's the same principle that some parts will make the image and other parts won't. And then, but as I say, when I printed it, it just wasn't right for me, so I was a bit disappointed. And there's another one. What happened as well is, you have to remember, all I was doing was getting up, having my breakfast, going to my studio, going for my lunch, going to my studio, going for my tea, going back to the studio, and then going to bed. So I was doing other things in between. I was sort of working things along, and then I started to work into that original drawing that I'd had, because I wasn't happy with this one, and just ended up, then I obviously went over and did a bit somewhere else, and then I ended up working another figure in. So this is the original drawing, but I've changed some of it, and I changed the horizon, and I added another figure, and I was probably so involved in drawing it, because I did just draw it on the wall, that I didn't really take a lot of pictures of what was happening in between. And when I didn't like it, I'd rub it out. I had a pack of baby wipes. I would never travel anywhere now without my baby wipes, because I never use them for cleaning anything but my drawings, because if something wasn't right, I'd wipe it out, and then I used China graph, and you're just sort of building it up and layering it out. And here, excuse me, it's on the proofing press here, and back in the studio, here. So they put the plate there that they've exposed, and then there's a series of rollers come over and lay the ink down on the plate, come back, and then lay the ink down on the paper. And I'm not allowed to touch the press, you know, they do it all the time, and Wednesday was always the best day to print, and this was the proof. So I was really happy with that, especially because I wasn't so happy with the other one. But so they proved it, they had a look, and then they just took the plate off, because they would print an edition. And really what you have to do is, you don't presume that your first idea is going to work, or your first piece is, that's the piece. You take it off, put it on the wall, you think about it. Can you improve it? Is it going to work? Because there's a big investment in time and effort to print an edition if it's not right. This was later on, when we did decide that we would do the edition. I wanted to try sort of a yellowy, stony colour on it as well, because just to sort of hold it together. Oh, lunchtime. So, canteen. This was a canteen where I ate 3 meals a day. Most of these are visiting artists, technicians. We just go and get our food from this little bit here. And she'd say, "Oh, what do you want?" And I'd sort of say, I'd point at a few things, and I'd say, "Is it hot?" And she'd say, so I'd say, "Oh, no. And that was it. So the food was very spicy, but it was good. There's some Not a lot of meat, which was fine. If you got anything like crabs, a lot of shell. You know, you realise that the people in China that I was working with aren't eating high protein, massive meals. This is tea. Jing's got tea. Jing was a visiting artist from Beijing, and Tea was a dog that belonged to some of the technicians who used to come in and visit in the evening. Because the technicians used to come in the evening, they'd go for the tea and then come back. And this is Jing's litho on stone. It was about 3 years ago, there was a massive train crash in China, and she did a whole series of prints on litho relating to that. Here, she's got the prints on the big litho press, and she's trying to add some, well, she wanted this sort of redness to show the horror of what had happened. I think there was hundreds of people died. The train fell off the embankment. And this is her whole series that she did from that. And then the ones on the floor are the ones that she put the colour on. But you probably agree that there's something about the black and white that are just really strong. So, as you can see, we had magnetic walls, which was fantastic. And when Jing went, I just nicked the magnets. So, this is the gallery that's on the base, and this is Jing, because her work was in the gallery because she'd been there the year before. This year they had my work in that gallery, so it's quite nice to have that in there. Oh, another picture of Tea. See, it was very hot, so they shaved the dogs apart from Maria's. Food, we've got lotus roots, I think, bamboo root, all sorts of strange food. You never really knew what you were eating. I'd finished the drawing of Nancy. I decided to try photo etching because I thought it might be quite interesting. And so there's a series of shots now that will show you George, because most of the technicians had English or European names, and he's doing my photo etching for me because you didn't do it yourself. There are some health and safety issues, and it doesn't look, you know, they do, you know, he's got his gloves on, but it doesn't have a mask on. This is a piece of copper, and they actually coated it using a silk screen with photosensitive emulsion that you would use for silk screen. So you put the silk screen frame on, you pulled the photo emulsion across, let it dry in a dark place, and then you exposed it like you would a photo silk screen. The thing is, we have tried this here, and it's quite difficult to do, but we're working on it over at Park Street, how to sort of do something similar. So the first thing he did, he's starting to wash away with water and a nice soft sponge, and he's washed it away a bit more. You can see the images starting to come. You know, as I say, these technicians, he's printed thousands of etchings, and so all the time he's been really careful to make sure he doesn't take too much off. Then when he'd done it, he put it out into the sunshine, so the sun hardened it, and then, and there it is. And then, Wednesday was print day, so I was working on this as well at the same time, so they put this back on the press to do the edition. And when they do the edition, they start saying, we want to get rid of this mark here, and you know, tidy everything up. So, and they also register it to make sure it's exactly in the right place on the paper. Now we're back in where he's putting it into the acid. It's scary because when they use aquatint, which is a fine resin powder, here we use masks. In fact, most of Europe is going towards aquatints that aren't made using resin because it's the sort of stuff that gets in your lungs. These guys do aquatint with a sieve you know, just tapping it to get a nice even coating. They've done it hundreds of times before, and you just, you know, you would worry. It's no mask, but he's working with the acid. Back to the press, and these are all the bits and pieces that they're just checking. And of course, they're really into print. All these technicians, they're there because they actually want to do what we're doing as well. So back to the more of this. He's taken the blue stuff off now, which is they had these bottles of liquids. I didn't know what they were. They looked like soy sauce and vinegar, but in fact they might have been. And you can see now he's got it really clean. And he's inking it up for me. So he's put the layer of ink on, and he's going to get me a glass of water. And so we just proofed in black once more, and they have their own ways of etching. Everywhere in the world is slightly different and slightly similar. So he put his layer of ink on, rubbed it with a couple of bits of newspaper, and then starts really wiping it fast. And as I say, you imagine these guys, all they do is print other people's etchings all day. So they're very fast at it, they do it very quickly. Back to the newspaper, you know, I think that's with cloth, and then that's the final inked up plate, and it's picked up all those bits of textures and from the water as well as the drawing. So it was quite fascinating. When he printed it, it looked too heavy for me because it was black. So whereas I was actually considering saying, oh, I'll have a big etching, I thought, no, I'll go back to the litho, and that's part of the plate. Thank you. I knew that's what you'd gone for. That's just a bite on the plate. It is amazing that they give you a piece of copper because copper is so expensive, but it was just so good to use. And obviously, I'm just saying what I want from it. I think that's the proof up on the wall. And that's a close-up of the etching. As I say, this was, for those of you who've done etching, this was sort of an open bite area, but in general, it replicated what I had almost, you know, too heavily really. In fact, I could tell where I wasn't so happy with the drawing on it, especially at that size. So I think actually what I tried to do was, there was a bit on there. I got the edge. This was the edge of the film, and I decided I would try and burnish it out. Didn't work. Here I am, trying to burnish it, but didn't work. So, and this was, I think, when I finally got this ready to print, and I put it on top of an area that was that yellow that went with the other print, the stone colour. And obviously I started to think, well, actually I quite like to do that with litho because the litho held the image. This was the first litho proof, and then here it is on the press. And then I actually added colour in flat areas for this one, and I also printed it in brown, which softened it quite a lot. Some of the areas I printed on different scraps of paper. I just said, oh, can you just put these bits of paper through for me while it's still on the press, because I just loved this area. And then what I did was I brought some of this home with me, where it is just that textured area without the more figurative drawing, which I've got, when I've got time I'll work into. This is the other end, another of those towers. American guy said to me, oh, what's that tower for? Now, that is a gun tower, and there are 3 gun towers in this village because China has this incredibly violent history in the early part of the 20th century. So they are everywhere, these gun towers, but obviously in America you don't have gun towers. Just behind that gun tower is this sort of Disney-style hotel, which is a big golf resort, and you've got these massive, massive contrasts. This old village, which is just like, I don't know, Beamish, their version of Beamish or something like that, and then, you know, they've restored lots of things. They've got the electricity coming out in a pipe, but they've also got these fish that are in the water out. They've beautiful wall paintings. Back to a bit more of my work, and I'm sort of changing it all the time, working into it. I didn't ever print these because just didn't have time, and that's it. You're keeping things going, but you can't finish everything. I decided I really enjoyed working with this, and you can see here I've taken a photograph where it's still wet, and I like the effect that it gets by chance, but trying to direct it was quite fascinating. And I took a series of these where it kept changing, then you think, oh no, I've gone too far. So you got my piece of wood, got my wood cutting tools, and decided, for those of you who saw the bit at the front with the thunderstorm, because of this amazing thunder and lightning, which knocked lights out and everything, that I decided that I would do a wood block with the thunderstorm. I've never really done a wood block before, but it's a big thing in China. It's a massive thing, so I decided to do it. I also got them to make a plate of the piece of drawing that I had with the ink, and thought I'd combine the two. And I made a blend on the roller. They had beautiful rollers, massive presses. So the roller would be this big. You'd mix the ink across the roller, get it nice and smooth, so you could go from sort of pink to blue to sort of purpley green. And let's say this was the proof on the lithograph, which quite like that. And then on that, what they did to get their images onto the wood was you did a photocopy and then you put it onto the wood with car thinners, which is once again horrendous for your health. And but you can see what you want to cut. These were some little bits just from the that were in. I'd sort of drawn in a little bit into it. But you can see the sort of these little animals in there. So more food, always interesting. I started to cut, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I started with the houses at the bottom, and then lotus field. It's getting a bit later in the year here. Everything's green. Everything grows really fast. The little allotments at the back. Chicken's legs, very popular delicacy. This is the press. I took the picture of the press so I knew where to set it up, because the measurement of how to set it up is here. This moves up and down. And every time I used the press, it was the only press that I was allowed to use myself. I printed something through. Can you see those sort of swirly lines in there? These sort of, they're like hairs everywhere. Well, I printed onto a piece of paper that was Indian paper with a lot of fibres in it, and I loved what happened there, so I decided I would cut all those shapes out. After all, I had all that time. So you can see that I started to cut them out there, and I carried on, and then actually, my house, watercolour, my wall. These are sort of chronological really, so I would have a rest now and again and go back and start working with colour. But you can see now, here I've started to cut out all those sort of curly bits. It's not a really very technical term, but and because I wanted that texture, it did take a long time. And I went to the post office, put the stamps on the back of the envelopes. It's my frog. Oh, there's tea again, just relaxing. Used to come in every evening, have a run around. I had a hitchhiker one night. I got home, put my bag down, and I had a grasshopper. And had to just remove it before the frog got it. Giving orders to his workers there, saying exactly how he wants it printed. He would sort of take it away into his studio, then come back and they would print it. And this is my pile of lithographs in the end that were waiting for me on my table. There's the woodcut prints there, and there's the prints of Nancy as well. So at this point, the waiting to be signed and editioned, I managed to go for a walk there. This was interesting that we went out of, you can see the tower, that sort of, you know, the hotel there at the back. So you came out of the village, and I didn't come out of the village for over 2 weeks because I just got a bit obsessed with the printing. And you look that way, you got there, then you look the other way, and the buses were going down there. Children didn't really have toys, they played with leaves and things. I thought I'd walk down that road, and as I walked down, this was what was beyond there. They're obviously building, China's building site, they're building a road through the middle of this little town. They've got these sort of quite smart, sort of smoked glass businesses with the factories, whatever. The people that work in them all wear uniforms that like pale blue pyjamas with embroidered names on. And the other side, I guess people that work in these places, in these sort of like prefabricated huts. These are the shops where they can buy things, and of course, because the road's going through, it's a little bit messy. The post office, where people didn't know where London was. So you suddenly, it's a bit of a culture wake-up call where you realise that people actually don't know where England is any more than France or Belgium or anywhere else. It was quite odd. The market. It's a bit messy, and the children are eating, they're eating ice cream and melon there. But I mean, and here, obviously they don't have running water, so they keep their water in this sort of tank for everyone to use. If you need water, you go and get a bucket and fill it with water. And the kids their toys were basically filling up empty Coke bottles or whatever with water and then playing with them. The girl from Australia that was there said to me, I'm going to do this project on Chinese children's toys. There aren't any, not where I was. You know, they are a luxury. Bit of paving. Obviously, they've tried the best to do it, and then it's broken, so they've fixed it, then it's broken, and they've fixed it. I guess you'd say that, you know, they're resilient, that they just keep working on things. When I looked down, I could see my prints on the rack, and then you can see paper everywhere, you know, because obviously they're getting, they need the best art paper to use. This was Shenzhen, which is just between, well, it's quite close to where I was, but obviously got Costa Coffee, places as big as LA, you know, massive skyscrapers. Once again, the building site that is China.
Got about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, okay, and I think this is me signing my prints and my wall. I've started doing other things. Yeah, that was the final etching with the border, and actually it looked much nicer in brown, so I quite like that. These are the people that were the technicians that I worked with, and this is probably for me oh, that's me on the press. That's one of. I added a little bit on there. Nate made this for me, which was the stamp that I could sign my name with. So he carved it, and it was lovely to be able to do that. This is George. This is his work. Quite abstract, sort of modernist. Sorry for our fine artists, it's wrong terminology there. Samuel didn't have a print yet. He was the intern. Leo, he was the boss of the etching. I can't pronounce his Chinese name, and that was a lithograph. This guy was the lithograph boss. He did the woodcuts, and they were beautiful. I mean, just such detail. They're really, really perfectly printed as well. This guy was the boss of the whole print base, or the studio manager, and he was working on really big plates and really big prints. This was an Australian artist who was working on some things Adelaide, and he was just doing about 18 colours on this wood block. Hugh was from American artist, who foolishly had said he was going to work in black and white. Then when he got there, I thought, oh, I can do colour. And they said, no, stay with black and white. Just one of the girls from Silk Screen, once again, that's a woodcut. A boyfriend who's obviously into Silk Screen. The guy is the administrator and the translator, who were really handy to have around, but I didn't see much of. You just made your own way in terms of the language. And it was all right. I was sort of amazing what you can do with facial expressions and hand movements. So lithograph again, etching, and woodcut. I mean, and Nate was meticulous. All his prints, fantastic. He was sort of just low down in the pecking order, and she was the intern who said, oh, I can't show you mine, it's not good enough, but we still had a picture. And this girl had come from uni for the summer to learn how to do woodcut. And so she just used to do hers. And you can see everyone else is sort of working in the background. And there we are. They used to come in, dress up and take photographs. It was like their holiday place here. This was what I brought back with me, 23 kilos of prints, nearly killed me. I put the drawing onto a silk screen to see what would happen. Quite interesting. People from, I mean, I felt like a giant. There is no other word for it. And massive prints that they're working on, but they're absolutely lovely. I'm on the website now, and I think, can we make this work? This was probably says it all about. Oh, wrong way, sorry. And no sound. He had squeaky shoes, and it was amazing. And that was it. They were just lovely, friendly people, and it was a massive thing to be able to do it. You know, it was fantastic. I think that's it. I've brought some of the prints. They're all around here. If you want to ask me any questions, ask away. I got some funding from the college, a small amount that was very, very difficult to get. It probably took months of work, but it did help. And I also got something from the Arts Council as well, which was much, much easier. But it's the first time I've actually submitted something, so it was all right. And obviously the guy on radio from the side was really helpful, so that's it.
Thank you, Francis. One question.
Yeah.
Do you think the visit to China has had like a lasting impact on your personal style? So do you think you've incorporated anything visually or technically?
I think what happened was you're completely self-sufficient, and you're also quite isolated. And when I started drawing, the big impact probably was that I was trying to put that feeling of sort of saying goodbye in a way, and also I wanted to really play with the wood club, but it was the drawing that really I want to do more. And in fact, there is a company in Hull that has a big printing press, so I think they might, when I get time to do some more drawing, might also do some more proofs for me. And I have sold quite a lot of these, and so it has been really good. And at the moment, they're all the two girls and the one are in York in displayed in interior design plays. So I've had them in different areas, you know, in galleries, the Roadport, Ferrans, in Beverley. I've sold them privately. I've sold from everywhere. So it's been really good. Cost of all taken 50% as well.
Yeah.
Questions, anybody?
Who was the second figure you drew in the
Well,
your cousin?
It was, as I say, I've got some drawings from San Francisco, but my cousin had two daughters, so it felt a little bit like it might have been them, or it might have been her and I on the beach, because I didn't ever meet her when I was young. I only met her when she was much older, but it was this sort of, it was a mental saying goodbye, and maybe that's why it worked so well for me, really. So, anyone else? Would anyone like to go to China? No.
Francis, obviously you're working on what essentially is very Western images over in an Eastern culture.
Yeah.
Did any dialogue arise from that with them? Or, you know,
What happened was, I suppose those images